Alright, hello everyone. In today's video, I will be talking about true even if responses. In my opinion, this is by far the strongest type of response that you can launch in debate. At its highest potential, what this response structure says is that yes, your argument is true, and it is for this reason that this would be your undoing. The simplest structure of an even if response is in its own title. Even if X were true, then Y. So what I will do is give some of the most important notes that I have to understand how to best utilize this response. First, there's one misconception I want to get out of the way immediately when debaters attempt to do an even if response. They would commonly say, even if this were true, at least we have this. Or, yeah, even if this were true, you still haven't responded to XYZ, which we argued. These responses might work if you have the specific intention of weighing arguments and accepting certain trade-offs in a particular exchange. However, for the purposes of what I want to teach today, this is not a true even if response. This is merely a deflecting response, which skirts the issue. It redirects to another argument, and it repeats existing material without directly engaging the argument that is presented by the other team. The reason why I say this is ineffective is that you're not really being genuine in embracing the possibility that X were true, which must mean that you should be charitable to the analysis they used in proving X to be true, and then you would deal the implications of this in your response. Instead, if you are merely deflecting, then the only thing that you might have proven is that both things can be true at the same time, when really this doesn't give you immediately the best chances for winning a round, since you're just forcing deadlocks upon deadlocks, because again, both of these things could be true, and you're just simply weighing these arguments against one another in terms of their impacts, rather than really dwelling on the even if response that you should be fixating on. So what is a true even if response? Well, the second thing I would want to say here is that one other way to think about this response structure is it has an aspect that concedes, and it has an aspect that spins. Except that you're not conceding in the conventional way, such as in giving into an argument and then attempting to mitigate it afterwards. Instead, it's like the God form of responses. You take them at their best case, and you are leveraging their own analysis against them. With masterful framing, this becomes very difficult to counter, especially since a true even if response is not really picky on what you're going to even if, which is still a good response, by the way. But the beauty in a true even if response is that you're willing to accept basically everything that is being stated and then use it in your favor. So what I will do now is go over some examples to build your intuition on the logical direction that a true even if response takes. Let's say the motion was, this house prefers to be born in a hardcore randomly generated Minecraft world. And you are faced with a government argument that states that we can live towards immortality so long as we survive the first few days in Minecraft. In line with this, they might even argue that there's likely a maximum lifespan for humans on Earth. Of course, if you were on the opposition, the immediate temptation you might have is to provide a host of reasons as to why it would be difficult to survive in a Minecraft hardcore world. And you might even spend a whole lot of time attempting to disprove this conclusion. Or, if you were more comparative and a little bit more charitable, you might even attempt to reasonably expand on your side and claim that the maximum lifespan is increasing more and more as technology develops, which is an attempt to mitigate their benefit compared to yours. So at least both sides could have a longer lifespan. These two strategies are of course very good and they would be very effective on its own. However, I would invite you to challenge yourself. You also have the option to respond by saying that even in the best case of immortality, this would be a very depressing and lonely life, and that the fragility of life on Earth is a good thing for a variety of reasons too. So, you sidestep this entire hullabaloo on survival by going directly to what matters most in life. And you have a whole lot of room, or even more room, to argue on the terms of the manner in which life is lived on both sides of the debate. So you're not just constrained by the longevity of life, but you're adding in another dimension by utilizing the response and the argument they presented against themselves through your even if response. In another example, let's say the motion was, this house would legalize vote buying. And of course, you might expect that there would be an argument that goes along the lines of, vote buying is illegitimate because you are manipulating voters, especially poor or low-income individuals who need the money for their daily needs. If you are responding to this argument, you might be tempted to simply say that people are likely to exercise good judgment, and that even low-income individuals would not just mindlessly give away their votes to anyone who promises them money. So you might argue that vote buying is legitimate on that basis. However, instead of leaving this deadlock to chance on whether these individuals exercise good judgment or not, whatever that means, it is also possible for you to say that even if people give their votes because they need it for their survival, and even if they do not exercise complete, full, perfect judgment all of the time, this is not only good for their economic well-being, which is the practical side of the argument, but this is also a manifestation of their own political preferences and interests as part of a democratic system, which responds to the principal part of the argument. And so, the more legitimate thing to do is to allow vote buying as one of the immediate ways to survey people's own vote, since money is a good determinant of what people believe to be good for their own lives, in the same way that single-issue voting is legitimate even if they do not consider any other issues on candidates, because that dimension of their life is deemed to be more important than anything else for the purposes of their vote. So here, in this type of response, we are maximizing their own argument for our purposes, to be able to spin it against them and show that our principle works because of the way you explained the argument. The last important note I want to make is that there's a reason why even if responses are difficult to launch. And it is simply that it'll be challenging to create an even if scenario that you can leverage towards the current stance that you have adopted. Firstly, and most importantly, I want to point out, there are of course many cases in which you should not launch an even if response. These are instances in which accepting a certain outcome in its 0.001% possibility will be your downfall, such as in a nuclear proliferation motion. You just simply cannot even if the possibility of nuclear warfare, since there's no way to spin that outcome in your favor, since your side equally likely does not want to have that type of warfare in the world. Right? In theory, it's possible to go hardline and say nuclear warfare, killing everyone in the world, is a good outcome if you adopt an anti-natalist position. But of course, this is severely inconsistent and it's pointless with the likely stance that you would be taking, which is that peace and preservation of life is a good thing. So here, I'm not talking about the perceived inconsistency of saying that an argument would not happen and then saying an even if response after it, because obviously this is not an inconsistency since you are operating on two different possibilities. Rather, it's more important to consider the strategic concessions you may be implicitly making when you are forwarding certain outcomes as good or bad, when you might say otherwise if it was applied to your own comparative. A quick example of this is if the motion where this house opposes organized religion. If government says that organized hierarchies creates a very rigid structure that alienates people and leads people to leaving religion entirely, then if you are on the opposition, you'd have to be very careful if you were to launch a hardline even if response that states that people leaving religion is a good thing. Because of course, you still might want to make arguments that say that organized religions are able to improve the faith experiences through large communities. So you have to be wary if you're going to launch an even if response that might undermine your own argument. So instead, a more precise even if response would be to say that even if organized hierarchies create rigid structures that unify beliefs which some groups of people may not always agree with, then it is good to root out some of the other smaller belief systems as they may be more extreme and less inclusive. And so this response provides you with the opportunity to leverage a clear characterization of what these rigid structures look like and the democratic process of churches responding to their communities of people through their faith experiences. And then you can launch your comparative as to why it is better on your model. And now this response, even if you're, launching an even if response here, it's now more consistent with the stance for your comparative because of the values you are adopting. And that's how you'd be able to resolve many of the consistency issues that might arise. All right, that's it for today's video. Thank you all and have a wonderful day and enjoy. Goodbye.